Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Political Brown Kid here, and here to do a video on Hollywood in black and white. And this is going to be on one of my favorite television shows, actually, or should I say cable series, which was Game of Thrones. And I'm not talking about House of the Dragon, I'm talking about the original show, Game of Thrones. Um, this video will probably be relatively short. And also, just to let you know, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones, there's probably going to be some spoiler alerts in this video. Possibly, I'll try to steer away from them, but sometimes you can't get around it. Just letting you know that up front, as well as that's probably going to be the theme throughout all of my videos. Spoiler alerts. So please make sure that you've seen it before you watch this content, or if you don't care, just go ahead and listen to me talk. So when you're dealing with the Game of Thrones, and when you look at it from a Hollywood and black and white perspective, there was some things that I thought that the show did well in regards to black people, but there were also some things that there's a continuous, consistent theme that Hollywood likes to do. So first, let me just address this. I honestly thought that the show was relatively good. The only thing that you can say is that they didn't build, one of those houses. You have the seven kingdoms of Westeros, and you had Dragonstone, you had Winterfell, you had Casterly Rock, you had Harrenhal, you had King's Landing, and so forth. And you didn't really see, and they did kind of show Valyria when Tyrion was kidnapped by Jorah Mormont. So again, spoiler alert, that was around season 5, season 6. So they kind of showed it when it was in, I guess, decay. And I do believe, and maybe because when you see House of the Dragon, so I'm going to kind of fast forward to the new series, and I'm not going to talk about it, I'm just referencing it. When you see the new series, they kind of made House of Valyria full of black people, Nubians, but we'll talk about that on that platform because they didn't really make it black. So we'll talk about that. But they in the original House of Thrones, in the original Game of Thrones series, you don't see a black house. You see the Dothraki. You may can kind of say, well, the Dothraki, because you have Jason Momoa, or however the hell you say his name. And let's just be clear, people, because I think a lot of people out here are confused about race. There's no such thing as a race of Samoans. Samoans are of Nubian descent, so let's just get that clear and put out there. People just automatically assume that in order to be black, you have to have certain hair textures, certain a phenotypical look, meaning you have a broad nose, big lips, and you have a particular skin color. So you have to pass a particular paper bag and comb test. But Nubians come in, their black people are very diverse. You can look at the Aborigines in Australia. You can look at even the Ethiopians and Eritreans and even the Egyptians. You can look at it and you can see that the range of diversity in people of Nubian descent, black descent, is very broad as comparison when you're looking at people of Caucasian descent. But with that being said, even if you have some people out there that want to debate that with the Dothraki, and you don't want to say that Jason Momoa is black, you can look at the Dothraki, and they kind of mix them in to make them this kind of lighter skinned black people. But the Dothraki have some definite Nubians built in there. But there really wasn't a full house of black people like you'll see with the other houses within Game of Thrones. So that's probably my one critique on that. But for the most part, I think the show stuck true to form, and I think the show was okay. The problems that I did have, there were minor problems. I just shouldn't say minor. I'm not going to say minor. So let me walk that back. Like I said, the blacks that you do see in there that are in the Dothraki, of course, the Dothraki aren't as eloquent as the other houses. The other houses are more organized. The other houses are kind of quote unquote more civilized, should you say. Whereas when you look at the Dothraki, they're more barbaric. And of course, you can associate them with being kind of a Nubian house. But the ones that you can definitely say are of Nubian descent that were in Game of Thrones, you can look at it when Lord, I forget the child's name now. The mother of dragons, um, Jon Snow's auntie, played by Emilia Clarke. I forget her name escapes me. I guess it's because I'm recording and I'm not used to being in the camera. But when you look at her, when she conquers that one nation and she's over there, and then they have she's being faced with I guess people massacring her soldiers. The prostitutes over there are black. So again, once again, it's they want to sexualize and they put the black women in the role so they can have them undress and get naked and show their ass and breasts and so forth. But they did, but in fairness with that, again, what I'm going to say is this: is that they did that with all of the women. They had Emilia Clarke get naked, and she's a white female. They had the women in King's Landing get naked. There were plenty of white prostitutes in there as well. But it's just that when you looked at the black females within that movie, in that particular kingdom, I forget the name of it right now. Um, it was one in particular. She was, a prostitute. And then the bigger problem that I did have with the show is when you looked at it, the blacks that were featured, Missandei, and you looked at Grey Worm, they all came from slave descent. So it's always putting black people in that, you're a slave type role. They don't really give you any type of um, royal or regal or eloquent background that you come from, as opposed to when you look at like the Lannisters, they come from a royal background. The Starks come from a royal background, even originating from the first of men that lived kind of like north of the wall. When you looked at Grey Worm and you looked at Missandei, they came from slave descent. And there really was no meat behind their characters, as far as from the history of their family. The other thing that I want to talk about is, well, before I talk about this thing, let me just say this too. The one thing that I think that Game of Thrones did well, though, that I liked is they, unlike most other shows, most other white network shows, they actually paired a black man and a black woman together, Missandei and Grey Worm. And they did create a relatively good love story where you felt the emotional love and connection between Grey Worm and Missandei. They actually gave them that. You do not see that in white shows. White people do not write love stories for black people. They just don't. And that is a very problematic. But Game of Thrones actually did create a good, loving relationship between Missandei and Grey Worm, and you actually felt the love there. The one thing that I want to talk about, though, is that what white people tend to do in a lot of shows, and this goes back to slave time, is they love castrating black men. They've been castrating black men since slavery. In reality, we're not dealing in fiction anymore. You go back and do your history, white people love castrating black males. And if you look in the movie Game of Thrones, I mean, not the movie, but the TV series Game of Thrones, once again, they castrated the black men because the black men were a part of the Unsullied Soldiers. A lot of those Unsullied Soldiers were black. And when you looked at it, and we're dealing with Grey Worm here, even though they wrote a good love story between him and Missandei, you have to realize he didn't have any sexual parts. He didn't have any working parts down there because they castrate the Dothraki. I mean, not the Dothraki, excuse me. They castrate the Unsullied Soldiers just to make them fighting drones. They're just drones. But he was able to, I guess he performed other acts on Missandei when they had their intimate love scene, because even the mother of dragons asked Missandei, well, how did y'all work it out? And Missandei just kind of gave this coy look. But again, here we go with the castration of black men. They do it in every movie. Even this movie called Life with Ryan Reynolds in it when they're dealing in space. So I'm kind of referencing another movie, but I'm not even going to do a review on this one, but I'm just going to plug this in. When they're in space, there's a black scientist, he's the one that works on this little foreign creature Calvin, this alien creature Calvin. But then it's realized that he has no working legs. His legs are like really deformed and decrepit. They're very small. And if you look at other movies, they either put black men in roles where we're non-sexual creatures. I'll reference one show that I'm probably going to do a review on. You can look at The Walking Dead. When that season started out, all he had was a priest running around, a black priest that played in he was on that HBO series about the prison thing with the prisoners raping each other. But he's in there, and all he is a celibate priest. So they love putting black people in that role where they're not sexual, black men, or they're castrated in some form, way, fashion, or form. They're missing their legs don't work. They have no appendage between their legs. They're missing an arm. They're missing something. So that's the only thing, but that's a continuous theme throughout Hollywood. But that's my just recap or my summary of Game of Thrones from a Hollywood and black and white perspective. And this is the Political Brown Kid. I'm out of here.